Okay, RJ, you're all set. Go ahead and share your slides, test your audio, and we can get started. Great. We see your slides.
Excellent. Kim, thank you. So I'm truly honored to be here today to give you guys the DRE and COM3000 best practices from DSI. Really do appreciate your time. I know it's kind of difficult to take time out of your schedules, but again, thank you so much for being here. As Kim alluded, I am RJ Price. I'm Director of Training and Onboarding for new L&I and MDU dealers at DSI. I've been in the industry for quite a while. I've been here at DSI for 16 years. And prior to that, after a little stint in the military, I spent 10 years doing residential and commercial installations for my family-owned DIRECTV company. The first C-band satellite I ever put in was back in 1978. I don't think you could really call that an installation. You know, at 6 years old, my dad just had me go underneath the house and stick that ribbon wire up through the floor. So, again, we've seen a lot of technology changes, and I guess that's kind of why I've stuck around in the industry, is because I love the technology. So let's kind of take a look at our agenda that we're going to cover today. We're briefly going to talk about the broadcast satellites, our primary satellites that are delivering programming to us. We're going to go through some trunk line installation tips. We're going to talk about some AIM meter required testing points in that trunk line. We're going to cover some DRE backdoor menus. There's a lot of installation problems that technicians run into that if they understand how to access these menus, they can quickly fix problems on service and installations. And then we're going to look at our COM3000 components. We're going to see how they're put together, how they fit together, and how to customize the correct solution for the properties that you're selling into. So let's jump right in, folks. So first of all, if you were to step outside and aim face south, the very first primary satellite that we have is 99 Ka. Now, it carries a lot of national HD and HD local channels. And right behind it is 99 reverse band. There's been a lot of questions, hey, what is reverse band? So first of all, it's one of the newest satellites up there. Reverse band was typically in the past only used as an uplink satellite signal, meaning delivering information from the ground to the sky. But AT&T, with some testing, some tweaking, or some refinement, they were actually able to get approval to use the reverse band link as a downlink signal. And it pretty much effectively doubled their capacity to deliver not just HD content, but 4K content, as well as eliminating the requirements for using like Satellite 95 for international, doing away with the secondary required dish. They also transferred some in Espanol programming from the legacy 119 satellite over to the reverse band satellites. So a phenomenal advancement for us. Next in line is your 101 KU satellite. A lot of standard definition basic DIRECTV channels and SD locals. Now we know this satellite is going away, and there's a lot of upgrades going on right now in the industry. Next in line we have 103 Ka, again, national HD and HD locals. Right behind it, 103 reverse band. Now 110 KU, currently we don't have any active US broadcasts, but it does show up on our signal spectrum whenever we're tuning our dishes. And then finally, in our last slot is 119 KU, standard definition in Espanol and standard definition locals. Now, when you're trying to tune an ODU, this is really not what you want to see. Now, there is a really neat application out there called Sat Finder Lite, and it works for both iPhone and Android smartphones. It utilizes the GPS and the camera of the phone itself, which you can hold to the sky, and it will actually show you right where those broadcast satellite signals are coming from. So it's a pretty good tool to have in your bag. Speaking of tools, this is the aim meter, and this is probably the most important tool to have in your installation bag. Now, if you don't have an aim meter, you really need to get one. A Super Buddy, a Bird Dog, they just aren't able to measure the required signals that an aim meter can. There's a little bit of setup involved for the aim meter. If you look to the right there, dish type, number 3. We need to make sure we've got that set for SL5 LNB. And if we are using a reverse band SL5, we'll put reverse band there at number 4. Our switch type, typically we use digital SWIM 30s in our commercial deployments. So that'll be SWIM module, 15 channel. And then when we enter our zip code, it's going to actually provide the pointing coordinates for our elevation, our azimuth, and our polarization. Then we'll click Install. So those satellites are approximately 22,000 miles up in space. That means 1 degree down here on Earth is over 400 miles off in space. So we've got to make sure we're using that aim meter to dither that dish using the fine-tune adjustment bolts for elevation and azimuth. Now, if you're not sure what dithering is, it's the process of finding the outside boundaries of your KA signal and zooming dead center on both your elevation and your azimuth. That KA signal is critical. Now, ensure you've got the most updated software version for your aim meter. You can still today go to www.satinstalltraining.com. Now, the website's no longer active, but they do keep the software up to date for downloading. One of the most important tests in your commercial trunk line, and especially at the ODU, is the aim meter's EIV Plus test. This verifies the type of LNB that you have installed. And more importantly, it tests both B and A band frequencies from 250 to 2150 megahertz across all the transponders on those satellites. It also tests an 18 volt and a 13 volt switching within the LNB, basically swapping from even transponders over to odd transponders. It also provides a 22 kilohertz testing tone that would swap the LNB from 99 and 101 over to 103, 110, and 119. So once you've got your commercial trunk line installed and your SWIM distribution installed, there are some required aim meter testing locations. These tests have to be performed at the ODU output lines, your polarity locker output ports, any trunk tap input ports, and your SWIM module input ports. And you must test at least one SWIM output port. And this is what you want to see. You want to see check marks on both even and odd transponders for all your satellites that are being tested. These are not allowed in your trunk line at all, or your SWIM deployment. So if you've got faceplates that have the white dielectric on those barrel connectors, they've got to come out. Those zinc crimp connectors, they will absolutely destroy your trunk line and your SWIM signals. Make sure you've got good compression fittings on all your connections. That's an old two-way 5 to 900 megahertz splitter. It in no way can pass our 250 to 2150 megahertz that we require. So make sure you get rid of them. And Lord forbid, if you run across one of these Radio Shack screw-on connectors, definitely have to be replaced. So make sure all of your trunk line and your swim connections are all 3 gig SWEP test approved materials. And Lord forbid, don't do this, okay? That is not an approved non-pin on the top left. Satellite dishes really should not grow on trees. I'm pretty sure your ASM's not going to approve co-op for that van wrap on the top right. And that's not a authorized pole mount on the bottom right. Now, the picture in the center is of my own personal design. And I do have a GoFundMe page set up for research and development of new types of LNBs. There's about 118 that I have not tried yet, so please contribute. In all seriousness. Let's move on to DRE. Let's look at some menu tips for the DRE system. So your DRE is going to require a typical D2 Advantage build-out. We're putting a receiver at every television outlet. And there's even an option for a managed DRE system. This allows in-room messaging. So, hey, Mr. Smith, your FedEx package has arrived. Please see the front desk. And properties can even insert their own local channels. So if they want a Barker channel that pops up their spa specials, you can insert that into the guide and have it set to when the television comes on or the receiver comes on, it defaults to that channel. DVR service is even available with a managed DRE system. And DVR is pretty important to a lot of people. I mean, I don't think I'd make my wife choose between me and her DVR. I might lose that fight. So DRE has a special software, and this software is downloaded by your distributor. I mean, we're taking these receivers out of their packaging, racking them, downloading this DRE software, and then going through and verifying the integrity of that software for you before we box them back up and ship them out to you for installation in the field. Now, this DRE software limits menu access. It also disables the RF remote feature in those receivers. Most importantly, though, it prevents locking of the system by the customers and tenants so that they can't block or set parental control locks to prevent the next customer from coming in and watching the programming. Now, there's some very important backdoor menus that will allow the installation technician to access and be able to check certain settings. The primary backdoor menu is easy to access. If you hit the red reset button on the receiver, when it boots up and comes to this screen, step 1 of 2, checking satellite settings, you're going to press and hold the little red circle below the left arrow. Now, this will boot the receiver into your configuration menu. This is the satellite setup menu. It allows you to verify the dish type, verify your C and reverse band, your swim switch type. And most importantly, if you're using high-powered digital swim 30s, you may need to go into the tuner configuration and manually set a tuner. Now, the aim meter has a very important test when you're troubleshooting and working with DRE systems. It's called the Swim Channel Assignment Test. Now, you would connect your aim meter to your swim splitter network. This will show you all the RID numbers of those receivers that's currently connected to that swim splitter network. It'll also show you the number of available or open tuners. It shows all the assigned tuners as well. So if you look down at the bottom right, RID ending in 8969 has been assigned tuner 4. RID 4767 has been assigned both tuners 3 and 7. Now that might tell your technician that, hey, Mr. Patel may have brought his dual tuner DVR from home and hooked it up in place of an H25, and now the entire tuner network is overloaded. So a very awesome awesome aim meter test to perform. The next menu for DRE that's very important is the DRE Institutions Mode menu. If you've ever seen this error when doing an installation, your TV or its cables are not HD. Typically that means you're connecting using a 10-pin composite or maybe even a component video connection to a television that has no HDMI. So the DRE Institutions mode gives you access to your display options, TV resolution, aspect ratio, language default, and closed captioning, as well as being able to set up multiple receivers in the same room. Maybe the remotes are conflicting and changing the channel on both at the same time. So it's pretty easy to get into the DRE Institution mode. We would go into our menu, and then we would select Smart Search. We're going to type in DRE Institution on. Then we're going to hit Select. On the next screen, we're going to highlight, and we're going to select All. That is going to log us into our DRE Institution Display Options menu. Now again, if we're connecting using a composite or even a component connection to the television, the first thing we want to do is select Video. We would go and turn Native to On, our Format to Original, and we would turn off HDMI control. Next, if we've got one of the older tube sets, Lord forbid they're still out there, and it's a 4x3, we may want to change the TV ratio to standard 4x3 output. Now, again, if we're using a composite connection, the only video format we're able to receive is a 480i signal. So under TV resolutions, we'd want to go in and unselect everything except the 480i option. Now, once we exit this screen, that's going to give us a restored video output without that error continually popping up telling us our cables aren't HD. Now, when we have more than one receiver in the same unit, and again, the remotes are conflicting and changing channels on both, we can actually go into the DRE Institution setup for multiple receivers under Remote and Advanced Settings. We would select Receiver Mode and highlight Receiver number 2. We would press Select and Mute on the remote for about 3 seconds, and pointing that remote away from the set-top box, we would enter 0, 0, 0, 0, 2, and then press Select on the remote. That remote now is only going to operate receiver 2, no longer changing channels on receiver number 1. Now, let's say that tenant received a new television for Mother's Day. Well, we want to connect it and give them the best video resolution available, which would be, HDMI. So we can go back into our Smart Search window, and we would type in DRE Institution Off. This is going to reset that receiver to the original DRE defaults. The receiver is going to reboot. And again, right into the normal DRE operation mode with the HDMI connection outputting 1080. COM3000, wow, this is phenomenal technology, made by Technicolor. Only 36 rack units tall. I'm sorry, 3 rack units tall. It comes in a 36-inch rack. It has a lot of reduced power consumption. If you think about a DRE installation at a hotel with 250 DRE receivers, think about how much power that uses on an annual basis. The COM3000 fully loaded chassis only uses about 225 watts. It can carry up to 138 high-definition DIRECTV channels in that single rack. Now, the HD output on a COM3000 is protected content. It uses ProIdiom, DRM, or Digital Rights Management software, to actually scramble the HD output on this. And you have to have a couple of items to be able to decode that DRM software. Number one, the property would need to have commercial grade ProIdiom televisions. Or if they didn't have commercial grade televisions, they could invest in a DCI 401 that decodes the ProIdiom. Or maybe the new AEP, Android set-top box, or Advanced Entertainment Platform box. Some properties even qualify for our transcoders to be able to receive HD programming on non-ProIdiom grade televisions. Let's kind of look at that COM3000 a bit deeper. It really only consists of 3 primary pieces of equipment. You've got your COM400 chassis that houses a COM51 tuner card and a QAM20 modulator. So that chassis, it can actually hold 2 of the QAM20 modulators on the top left. It has the slots available for 6 of the COM51 tuner cards. It also sports 2 1-gig Ethernet ports and 2 10-gig Ethernet ports. Your COM51 card. So if you've got a mailbox outside, you can have mail delivered. Well, the COM51 card actually has a mailbox, and that mailbox ID is 192.168.3.18. That's a very important IP address because we're going to utilize that when we connect our laptop and try to communicate and set up our COM3000 system. Now, this COM51 card comes out of the box, authorized for 8 high-definition DIRECTV channels, standard. But it's upgradable to a total of 23 channels with a software license. It has 2 RF SWIM input connections on it. When connected to a digital SWIM 30, port 1 on that COM51 card will be able to see and read 15 total tuners. Port 2 will lock in 8 of those tuners. The COM51 card uses IP to deliver these HD channels to a QAM20 card. It can also do a multicast IP output to a layer 3 switch if you're, deploying an IP network. In some cases, it can even do both at the same time. So a pretty versatile card. And when we look at that COM51 card, it's got several LEDs on it. The top 3 rows, those are your power indicator. The second is your activity indicator, which is going to flash when there's IP communication going on between the chassis and the card. And then a link light is the top third one. It's going to be solid green when it's connected and powered by the backplane of the chassis. Your bottom three LEDs are your boot up, normal operation, and error indicators. Your COM20 card. So this is what takes that IP signal from your COM51 cards and converts it to an output of high definition channels over a coax. Out of the box, it comes with 16 QAM channels. Now, if one QAM channel can carry 3 high definition DIRECTV channels, that means that you can have a 48 channel system with the COM20 standard 16 channels. So you don't have to upgrade or purchase additional licenses to have a standard 48 channel output of HD. Now this COM20 is upgradable to a total of 48 QAM channels. And think about the capacity there. I mean, that's 144 slots for HD content. So if you've got a fully loaded COM3000, that'd be 138 high-definition DIRECTV channels and up to 6 inserted local content channels maybe. Now this COM20 is pretty agile as well. You can set the output for your QAM channels at any digital channel, preferably channel 23 or above. You could set it for digital channel 30 or digital channel 40. So it's very versatile as to how you output your HD channels. Uses 6 megahertz bandwidth on the coax per QAM channel. Now, it does have a data input limit as far as bandwidth from your DIRECTV high-definition channels. The max is 38.8 megs per QAM channel. Now, honestly, you would never want to put, high bandwidth channels like, ESPN, ESPN2, or maybe the NFL Network all on the same QAM channel, because some of those high action channels will burst of 16 to 18 megs per second. And if you've got 3 of them on the same QAM channel, it can exceed the max of 38.8 and cause video and audio issues. It does output at a plus 28 dB MV level, which is a pretty hot output signal. Now, internally in that COM400 chassis is what we call a WebStack switch. And that is the IP address to access it, 192.168.10.3. You need to be aware of this because if you are doing an IP network output, there's some settings that you'll need to change, but it's also the connection point on the COM3000 for your laptop. It also delivers the IP streams from your COM51 card to your QAM20. Again, it's also what delivers your IP streams to your offsite or layer 3 switch for an IP network build-out. Now, each one of those lights represented down there represents a port. One of the most important things to know about that WebStack switch, though, is that when you first log into it, it's going to ask for a login query, which is admin, but I highly recommend you leave the password field blank here, because you set a password, you lose it or forget it, passwords at this WebStack switch cannot be cleared. And loss of that password means you're going to have to return the entire COM3000 rack to your distributor for a complete factory reset. You definitely don't want to do that, right? So each port, again, represents a connection or activity. Ports 1 through 6 on the web stack switch represent your COM51 cards. Port 7 is the top QAM20 port, and port 8 is the bottom QAM20 port. Number 9 actually represents 2 connections. It's an unmanaged switch that connects both 1 gig Ethernet ports on the front of the chassis. Number 10 is your top 10 gig port, and number 11 represents your bottom 10 gig port. So the very first thing that we have to do as a technician or installer to be able to set up and communicate with the COM3000 is we've got to actually set our laptop up to be able to be on the same network as the COM. We're going to have an Ethernet connection from our PC to one of the 1 gig ports on the front of the COM. This allows us to do our channel lineup of DIRECTV channels. It allows us to set up our electronic program guide or our EPG in the COM. It also gives us access to do remote monitoring and troubleshooting. Now, you will need a wireless internet connection to the laptop because, again, we're utilizing the Ethernet port on it to connect to the COM3000. Well, the first thing we've got to do to set it up properly for communication with the COM is we've got to go into our network and internet settings. We're going to highlight Ethernet, and then we're going to choose Change Adapter Settings in Windows 10. That's going to give us the option of highlighting our actual Ethernet port. We would right-click on that Ethernet and then select Properties. Next, we're going to find our Internet Protocol version 4, or our TCP IP v4 connections. We're going to right-click on that and select Properties on it as well. Now, the default here is usually obtain an IP address automatically, but we need to use a very specific IP address to be able to be on the same network as our COM system. We're going to use 192.168.3.254. We're going to use a subnet of 255.255.0.0. And we're going to leave our gateway blank. Now, again, we're going to make that 1 gig port connection from the laptop to the COM3000, at which point we can open a browser, preferably Chrome, and type in the IP address of our COM51 card. Again, that's the mailbox. That's how we get to our COM's communication. The 192.168.3.18. The first thing you're going to see is a password challenge. That password is lowercase COM3K. That gives us access to a lot of different commands at the top of the overview page. We have overview, we have discover, pairing info, and that's where you'd go to actually see the access card and activation information for your COM51 cards. We can actually go to 401 for our DCI 401 setup. We can go to Android and set up our AEP boxes. We do a lot here on this particular overview screen, though. Down below in the columns, you can see security. Again, that's going to be defaulted to Pro Idiom if we're doing any type of HD output. Now, if we're doing transcoder, it may have transcoder listed there. The next column under channel, this is our actual channel drop down. And we would drop that down to whatever we wanted that tuner to carry as far as an HD DIRECTV channel. Now, I highly recommend when you're going to set your channel lineup up that you do it in DIRECTV numerical channel order, especially if you're going to be setting up an electronic program guide. It makes that setup a lot easier. So you would, local stations 4, 7, 11, 16, and then 202, 204, 206, and 207 for your DIRECTV channels. Keep them in numerical order. Again, you'll appreciate the ease of the electronic program guide setup if you keep it in that lineup. The next is your mode. As you can see on the display, we've got it set for QAM. And we've got that first QAM channel outputting to digital channel 23.1, then 23.2, and 23.3. Your next port is bitrate, and it's a snapshot of the data that particular DIRECTV channel is currently outputting. So we've got 0.3 megs for tuner 1, 9.3 megs for tuner 2, and 7.9 megs for tuner 3. The next is your signal-to-noise ratio. Now, this is very critical to you. A good signal-to-noise on a COM system is 13 or higher. If that signal-to-noise gets down to a 10, that box will turn yellow. And that means one of two things. You've either got an improperly tuned ODU, therefore you need to repeat your dish, or you've got some type of noise or signal reflections in your trunk line. Now, if that signal to noise drops down to an 8, you're really going to have some problems, because then at that point you probably lost your channels. And then strength. This is the signal coming in from our digital SWIM 30 to the COM51's input ports. Now, DSI, if you purchase a rack from DSI, we're actually going to install a 9 dB DRE tap between the digital SWIM 30 output and the COM51's input. We're going to knock that down about 9 dB. We know that a digital SWIM 30 outputs at neg 25. A really good input signal to our COM is somewhere around 34, 35, and 40 dB. That's the sweet spot for the signal. Not too strong, not too weak. It's a thing of beauty. So if we were to click on our QAM command, or even click on the QAM IP address from the overview page, it's going to take us to the QAM page. Now, this is where it shows you your digital output channels. So QAM1 is digital channel 23. It also gives you your bit rate per port and gives you a total bit rate for the QAM. So once you get your channel lineup completed, you're going to want to go to the QAM tab and verify that you're not exceeding, my recommendation would be a max of 35 megabytes per second per QAM channel. If you are, try to move some of those channels around to lower bit rate QAMs. Make sure we don't exceed our, because once it hits 38.8, you're going to have signal breakup on those channels. So this is our EPG, or our electronic program guide on the COM3000. It is a scrolling guide. Video only, no audio. Even local channels can be inserted here. So, that assisted living facility, if they wanted to add their bingo channel for, tenants that are, stuck in their room, they could actually not only add it to the COM3000's channel output, but they could add it to the guide, the scrolling guide, to tell the tenants what channel to put their TV on to locate it. You can even add a property logo to this EPG. So this is your DCI 401, the set-top box made by Technicolor. It decrypts the ProIdiom digital rights management software, and it comes with an RF remote. It has an interactive program guide, and this is a great selling feature even for properties that have commercial-grade ProIdiom televisions. It's almost like having, a DIRECTV receiver at the television. Use the remote to scroll up and down, highlight and select the channel that you want, and receive information off of that channel. So a really good selling point on the DCI. This is our AEP, and we've got a separate training on this, so I'm not going to steal any thunder, but I do want you to take a look at the box itself. Here's what sets it apart. This AEP box does both QAM and IP input. So unlike the DCI 401 that only has a coaxial QAM, we can actually do Cat5, Cat6 deployments for IP to the AEP box. It does require 25 megs of dedicated internet for every 100 box installed on a property, and I recommend a lot more. It can see 5 gig and 2.4 gig wireless internet signals to be able to do the applications. It also has an interactive program guide and totally cloud configured, so a really cool new product. These are our transcoders or receiverless HDs. They are incredible. They'll take a 1080i MPEG-4 signal, down convert it to 720p native, which is 16:9, and watermark it and send it back out as an unencrypted RF or over coax output. I mean, that's phenomenal. It takes an IP input from the COM51's HD DIRECTV channel output, down converts it, and then sends it back out via IP to your QAM20 modulator. There's even versions that receive IP input and output through its own QAM output. So receiverless HD Plus, this is really neat. Again, I think assisted living facilities, RV parks. I mean, how many RVs pull up with commercial grade televisions, right? Hospitals, prisons, fitness centers. Think exercise equipment. Very few of those have Proidium tuners built in. Now, currently, it's not authorized for hospitality, and you can't add any premiums like HBO or Encore or Stars. Now, there's a special type of connection for the transcoder. Since we're already using the Ethernet port on our laptop to connect to the COM3000, we'll need a USB to Ethernet dongle. Now, once you plug that dongle into your laptop, under your Internet and Settings options, it's going to give you an Ethernet 2. We'll need to go in and set that up, just like we did the Ethernet on our laptop originally to communicate with the COM3000. So we'll find those, TCP IPv4, right-click, go to Properties, and we'll enter the IP of 192.168.100.10. Subnet of 255.255.255.0. Leave the gateway blank. Now that's going to get us connection directly to the floodgate system itself. Now, floodgates of 54 channels or less will connect using the 1 gig port on the COM3000. And that would be connected to the onboard Ethernet connection on the floodgate. The USB dongle itself will connect to the Ethernet card that's added into the bottom of the CPU. Floodgates of 60 channels or more will actually utilize a 10 gig connection on the COM3000 from the Ethernet card on the bottom of the CPU. And the USB dongle in this case from the PC would connect to the onboard Ethernet port on the floodgate itself. So once we've got those connections put together, if we were to type in 192.168.100.1 in our browser, that's going to bring us a certificate warning, which we'll have to accept, and then log us into our floodgate. We'd have to enter admin as a password, admin as a username. Now, keep in mind, these floodgates are totally configured within our DSI lab. And, you know, as long as you've got remote access to the laptop, there's nothing that the DSI engineering team can't support you in. Now, if you want to take a look at your streams, there's a status button on the left of the login menu. And this will give you your bit rate information, what you're receiving from your COM51 cards, and the bit rate of what you're outputting back to the QAM20. Now, speaking of that remote access, this is the TeamViewer, free remote access software. You know, so that you can have this loaded as unattended access, and as long as you've got that wireless internet connection to the laptop, you can actually log in, troubleshoot, monitor, change channels on your COM3000 system, all remotely from your office. Again, you will be required to have an Ethernet connection to the COM3000 from the laptop and a USB dongle connection to the floodgate. So, RF distribution. You know, this is where the majority of new COM3000 installers and technicians have issues, is actually balancing the RF distribution output. You've got to go in, you've got to replace all the substandard amplifiers, all the taps and, you know, crimp connectors. You've really got to pay attention to that. Optimal signal behind a television for a COM distribution is about 5 dBmV. So, you know, just like installing your trunk line for a DIRECTV ODU in commercial, you've got to have a good meter. You've got to be able to measure QAM, in some cases NTSC and ATSC for local content insertion. The H30 meter does all of this. It's a really good meter, mows grass, makes coffee. But more important, it reads the 5 to 1,000 megahertz range very thoroughly and gives you a lot of critical information when you're balancing your distribution system. Again, we're going to start our QAM digital output at about channel 23. Now think about that in terms of megahertz or frequency. That's about 219 megahertz. So we've got to also understand and calculate our loss over cable at the highest frequency that we're actually outputting. You know, if our highest channel is digital channel 62, that's where we need to be measuring our loss. That's about 450 megahertz. You know, at 450 megahertz, that's almost 5.5 dB loss over 100 foot of cable on RG59. That's about, you know, 4.5 of dB loss on RG6 and almost 3 dB of loss on RG11. So understand your frequencies that you're actually sending out across your coax. Now, when we go through splitters, again, we have loss. Measured at 1,000 megahertz, a two-way splitter has 4 dB, a four-way splitter has 8 dB, and an 8-way splitter has 12 dB. I recommend the Holland low-frequency splitters, low loss. And then taps. You know, if I've got 4 televisions immediately at the rack, but then I've got 50 televisions that are 300 foot away, I'm going to have to put a tap port in there to be able to knock that signal down for those 4 local televisions at the rack, but try to minimize the loss on the pass-through going to the other 50 televisions that are 300 foot away. You do have loss. You've got to be measured. You've got to be able to measure your loss and know what your dB levels are at the furthest television away. Now, here's my recommendations to you. First of all, site surveys are not recommended. They are required. You've got to get really accurate cable distance measurements. You've got to know exactly how many outlets that you need to feed. And use good high-quality materials. This is not the area to skimp on. Use good amplifiers, good splitters, faceplates. And over-design your distribution system, because it's a lot easier to attenuate that signal way down the line than it is to amplify it. And above all, guys, be safe out there, okay? There's a lot of things that can hurt you, and we all need to come back to our families safely. So thank you once again for spending some time with me today. Again, I'm RJ Price. You can reach me at ricky.price@dsisystemsinc.com or my direct number below. Any technical questions, you ever need engineering assistance or a sales quote, please send us an email at engineering@dsisystemsinc.com. Thanks again, folks. I hope you have a blessed day.
RJ, that was great. Thank you so much. It was such a great wealth of information to share with the dealers, and we have the best participation so far on your presentation. So obviously everybody was excited to hear you chat. You can go ahead and stop sharing your screen now, or I can help with that. There we go. And then we'll go through a couple of questions. So a couple have come in to the chat box since we started. And I will go ahead and go through those now. So one of the first questions that came in was a clarification on sending premium channels through the floodgate, so for the receiverless HD system. And so the answer to that question is you are not allowed to broadcast premium channels through the receiverless HD system. This is a programmer requirement. And so that was one of the questions that came in that I wanted to make sure that we clarified. A second question that came in, RJ, that you can help me answer is one of the dealers said during your slides on the doing both QAM and IP output from the same COM, the question was, can we output both QAM and IP from the same QAM without issues? The last time we did that, we had major issues in the past, specifically macro blocking on the IP side of the system. So can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, that will happen. I mean, you can't change IP addresses within the COM systems themselves. Most of the gear is going to be pretty static. You're not going to be, so if there's a conflict within your IP network, those conflicts have to be resolved on your switch side, on your IP deployment side.
Got it. All right. Let's see if there's any other questions here in the chat. One of the questions was about just logistically speaking, can you guys get a copy of the recording? Absolutely. We've been recording this WebEx, so we will send out the link to that for anyone that missed the beginning. Another question, does the receiverless HD option require specific commercial grade TVs?
No, as long as it has a digital tuner in it, it'll work fine. It does not require the Proidium. And that's the reason for the floodgate, is for this product to be able to work in those facilities that, you know, they have 200 televisions and can't afford to upgrade them. You can put a transcoder in there, get rid of the old analog distribution systems, and give them a good quality 720p HD as long as they've got a tuner.
Great. And then I think this comment that came into the chat panel is about that prior question on QAM and IP distribution. This comment says you need to use only 16 tuners when doing both RF and IP. So would you agree with that, RJ?
There are some instances where you can utilize 23 tuners, but again, the network conflicts on the IP side are what prevents some IP deployments from being able to do so. If you do narrow down your tuner output, that will assist but that's more bandwidth. If you don't mind, send me an email at engineering@dsisystemsinc.com with those questions, and we can clarify. We'll get Keith Shing, our head lab engineer, on the line with us and be able to dig into that a little deeper.
Great, thank you. Okay, another question came in from a dealer, if there's any information available on how to properly dither a dish. So I know that wasn't part of our training today, but is this something that you guys happen to make available from the DSI side?
There are some manuals for dithering. The aim meter itself will walk you through kind of a long-winded process of dithering. And you've got to be pretty exact on your CW to be able to mark it and be able to count your turns on your fine-tune adjustments. But yes, there are some documents available. Shoot me an email at engineering@dsisystemsinc.com, and I'll see what I can get over to you.
Great. Another question. You mentioned installing a 9 dB DRE tap between swim outputs and card inputs. Is that a better solution than using high-frequency attenuators at the card?
So the DRE taps are specifically made to filter and tap down your swim signal. I mean, that's what they were made for. We use those. They're very reliable and very. They're what they're made for, is the actual swim signals. Now, the high-frequency attenuators, in a pinch, they would certainly work, but we do prefer to use the DRE taps.
Got it. Another question, is the COM3000 system stable when feeding it from a swim 30? With other systems, things get flaky when going over 24 channels per switch.
So, no. The COM, as long as you're hitting the COM with a good signal to noise ratio, and again, tamping down the neg 25 output to your COM51 input, again, you're a lot more stable at neg 35 than you are neg 25. That's a very hot signal to hit anything with, a DRE receiver, COM51, whatever. So really haven't seen that, be an issue, as long as your signal to noise ratio, and again, that reflects more in your dish tuning and your trunk line distribution than anything else. So if you've got a 13 or better on your signal to noise ratio on your COM, it's stable.
Great. Okay, another question on receiverless HD. Understanding that premium channels can't go through the receiverless HD system, can you add an SD mod and send a premium as part of the lineup?
There shouldn't be an issue with that. Again, that's going to be a SD deployment. You would need analog modulators and standalone receiver to be able to do so, but I can't see there being an issue with that. Kim, do you?
I don't think so. I don't know that you want to install an SD, like a D12. We don't even allow that anymore, but I guess an H25 analog output should. I'm on the outside of my technical understanding, but you can deploy premiums through an H25 analog system.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see a reason why you couldn't put, a ZV, SD modulator in there and connect H25s to it and be able to send that out along with your floodgate signal. I don't see any issues with doing that.
Okay. Is it possible for a single swim channel to go bad on a swim module, or is the entire swim port bad?
Well, I've seen some funny things. I've hit some, tuner 10 and having issues there, and swap over to the other swim output port, and it's perfect. So their power surges can do some pretty strange things. Typically, when I've seen bad swim equipment, it's either one port, the entire port, or the other. But again, I have seen instances where particular tuners on a swim port can give you issues. So I'd say power surges can do strange things.
All right. And what would be your advice if that happens? If they have a single swim channel go bad?
Replace the entire digital swim 30.
Replace the whole swim. Okay, that's what I figured. 2 more questions. Does using a floodgate allow me to go receiverless and remove the LG set-top 5500?
Yes, as long as the television has a digital tuner. You can take out all the set-top boxes altogether. Absolutely.
Awesome. And then on DRE, when setting the receiver to institution mode and you set display for SCTV, doesn't the set-top box default to HD when the power button on the remote is pressed?
No, by going into the institution mode, it sets it until you go back in and turn the institution mode off. Now, typically, that is a problem if you're just hitting the exit button on the remote without going into the DRE institution mode. But the DRE institution mode saves that setting even after a power cycle unless you turn it off within the Smart Search.
Awesome. Well, RJ, it looks like they haven't been able to stump you with any of their questions. So thank you for all of that additional information and taking some live Q&A on the fly. We are 4 minutes over time. Thank you to everybody who joined the session today. Thanks, RJ, and the whole DSI team for training. We'll talk to you guys in about an hour from now. Come back and join us for PDI, who will be training us on managed DRE and unmanaged DRE. Thanks, everyone. We'll talk to you in about an hour.
Have a great day, everyone. Thank you.